You can call me stupid.
Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about the smokeless fire pit that I built a couple weeks ago. There's been a lot of questions about it in the comments, and frankly some accusatory statements.
That's shocking.
I'm going to give you some tips and hints that I've figured out since building it. I just want to be totally honest and come clean with you. Spoiler alert, it works even better than I thought. It's amazing. Sorry about the lighting. It is super bright out here and there's not a cloud in the sky, but I want to show you real quick how this smokeless fire pit works. I haven't attached my caps on here yet, so I'm just going to pull these off real quick. The basic premise of how this works is cool air with fresh oxygen comes into these gaps from where I pulled out the pavers. Then that air travels up the gap between the ring and the pavers. And once it gets to the top, it is warmed at that point and it comes out the hole and provides hot, oxygenated, fresh air to create a secondary burn. Now, I'm no expert and no scientist. I'm just telling you kind of how the solo fire pit and the Brio fire pit explain how they work. Some people told me that on those fire pits, when they're working at like peak efficiency, you'll actually see little flames coming out of these holes. Now you never see that. But I did notice the other night whenever we used this that it got hot enough that, like when my girls held a little stick over the edge, it would ignite the end of it because that air coming out of there is really hot. Take that for what it is. I'll have more on that later. Let's talk about issue number one. Some people said that the second fire was tiny compared to the first fire. It was just made of tiny little sticks and twigs. I mean, it ain't like everybody don't know when you put 5 logs on the fire, it don't smoke. But when you put that 6th log on, it smokes like a freight train. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I know, man, that's what I'm saying. He ain't even used a scientific method. I like your style. Where'd you get them pants from? Some people said the second fire didn't smoke because it was lower in the pit as opposed to the first fire. Let's hear what Jim Bob had to say. Siri?
Seriously has before fire sticking out well above the rim of the pit, and after fire well below the pit, and he calls it a comparison? Your contraption must suck, or you would have been fair about the results. You won't waste my time again. Do not recommend was made specifically for goofs like you.
Oh, Jim Bob, he got his panties in a wad big time. To Jim Bob, I say, good day to you, sir. I'm gonna show you why those guys and Jim Bob were wrong later on in the video. A lot of you left really good suggestions in the comments about improvements that could be made. So I wanna go over those with you and tell you what I think I kinda wish I had done. There you go, Coco. Come eat, come on. To allow the airflow in, I removed 3 of the pavers out of the bottom ring, and that left 3 big gaps, which I think it works really well. It lets in a lot of air there, but I wasn't able to do it evenly because I didn't have the correct amount of bricks because I was using just the pavers that were already here. Some of the people mentioned that why didn't I just space them evenly? And actually that's a great idea. It just never occurred to me whenever I was filming to do that. So that's actually really good. Pull out 3 or 4 of the pavers and then you can space the remaining ones and you can leave a smaller gap all the way around more evenly. So that's a great idea. Another idea would be if this biting fly would just leave me alone because it's driving me nuts right now. It was suggested that instead of drilling the holes around on the top of the fire ring, just drop the fire ring down a few inches and let the air flow over the top of it. And actually that's a fantastic idea too, I think. Again, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know how that would affect anything, but I think that would work basically the same. The only reason that I had it all the way up and drilled the holes was so that I could set the cap on top of it, and it would actually have that to rest on as well. Here's another tip, and I think I mentioned this in the other video, is that instead of using these are the 11.5-inch pavers, stackable pavers. I think they sell like an 8-inch one. If you made your fire pit out of the 8-inch ones and then bought the caps that are pre-made for the 11.5-inch, you wouldn't even have to make your own concrete tops for this. And so there's just another huge time saver for you. I use this fiberglass mesh to give it a little bit of extra strength instead of using rebar because I couldn't find any small rebar. Technically, you probably don't even need any rebar or mesh in this. I just did it as an extra precaution. As far as the rebar goes though, you could actually use hardware cloth or even chicken wire to go on the back of this. Those are very easy to find at a local hardware store. But to give my concrete texture, I used baking soda, and that's what gave it this really aged look. Some people didn't like that. You know, if you don't like that, you don't have to do it. But other people asked if you could use like ceiling texture to throw onto the mold or anything. Would that work? I don't really know if that'll work or not. I was in the precast concrete industry many long time ago. And this is what we used. We used baking soda and water because you can give every piece its own individual texture. It's easy to dissolve out of the concrete after it comes out of the form. And any that's left in the form is also easy to wash out. Another one of my favorite tips that was in the comments was to use black high heat spray paint to spray the fire ring with. I think that's a great idea for a couple reasons. One, I'm just not really, after having this for a little bit, I'm not really thrilled with the silver inside. There's just something about it that looks incomplete. So I think this black spray paint will be great. They actually have, this is good to 1200 degrees. They actually had a can right next to it that was up to 2000 degrees. And don't ask me why I didn't buy that. I just bought this one. There's another reason you might want to spray yours, and I'll get to that in just a second. Let's talk about the second most controversial subject about this smokeless fire pit, okay? And that is that the fire ring itself is galvanized. Several people commented on how dangerous that was. Not really. Welders have to deal with that because they're using really high heat, and I mean, their faces are pretty close to what they're welding. And when you do put high heat on galvanized metal, it can put out noxious fumes. And if you're not in a well-ventilated area and you breathe that in, it can cause a cough and no long-term side effects. Welders drink milk to get rid of it. I'm outside in this huge, I mean, can you get any more well-ventilated than this? I don't think so. Unless you're gonna enjoy if you sit around your fire pit like this and like this, then I don't know what to tell you. However, if that does bother you, you can remove the zinc coating using vinegar, and you can also do, like I mentioned with the black paint, you could paint your ring with the black paint and that wouldn't be an issue. As I mentioned, I may do that just because I don't like the way that this silver looks, but I'm pretty paranoid about safety, especially because I have 3 little girls, and I don't see this as being an issue whatsoever. So you make up your own decision about that. Since some people thought that that fire wasn't big enough to prove anything, I'm gonna rectify that right now. We're gonna build a nice, big, honking fire. We shall endeavor to belay any concerns that someone may have as to whether or whether not the smokeless fire pit works. We shall settle this debate henceforth and forevermore right now. Plenty of wood in there. Ooh, and it is hot. I will tell you this, if you want to build a small fire, I would definitely recommend going with a smaller ring. This works better once it really gets heated up. Once it gets hot around the sides is when it really starts to burn the smoke off. You can actually see, I'll try to get some shots of it, you'll see smoke inside the fire pit, and every once in a while a little bit of it might make it out. But for the most part, what happens is the smoke rolls around inside the fire pit and it will burn up before it actually leaves the fire pit. One thing I forgot to mention that, you know, because I'm probably gonna have people complain now that the fire's too big. This wood sits outside, it's covered in bark, and we just had like a torrential downpour, rained all day yesterday. So this wood isn't even that dry. Now, I mean, the wood itself has been drying since being cut for a long time, but like I said, it just was in the middle of a downpour yesterday, so it's not thoroughly dry, and you can see how well this works. If you haven't seen the original video of the smokeless fire pit build or hanging up the patio lights around it, be sure to go. Patio lights around it, be sure to go.
This guy's stupid, and his impressions suck.